It was back on May 10, 1980 that the Royal Bahamas Defense Force came to life, an official force to protect the country's sovereignty and police its territorial waters, ensuring that the country had a naval force to defend its borders. The men and women who enlist are the guardians of our heritage. I'm your host, Jiminita Swain, and we take a look at the role of these guardians of our heritage and the improvements made available through Operation Sandy Bottom Project. When the force was commissioned, its fleet consisted of 4 Mark I launches that had been inherited from the police maritime division, and now today it has more than 20 craft, along with 3 airplanes able to be used in RBDF operations, exercises, and missions. The Sandy Bottom Project is the single largest capital investment by government to upgrade the Defense Force with a $232 million price tag. Now the force is positioned to enhance its capabilities to protect our borders and marine resources, as it now has new patrol craft, a dredged harbor, and the decentralization of bases in the northern, central, and southern areas of the Bahamas. The mandate to protect the 100,000 square miles of maritime space the Bahamas occupies forces the Royal Bahamas Defense Force to act as guardians against a number of threats. However, those guardians are those men and women who choose to enlist. Recently, along with other media colleagues, I took part in a media embed with members of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force that left a lasting experience and snapshot of what it really means when you commit to become a Marine. Fresh-faced and excited, I fell in line not really knowing what to expect. Probably the same occurs with other recruits who opt to enlist. From the onset, it's clear the base at Coral Harbor is a controlled environment. I learned the importance of following orders and complying.
Is that understood? Is that understood? Yes, sir. You're not a civilian anymore. You're now part of the military. What you gonna do? You're gonna pick up your bags. You're gonna put one single file heading towards that way. One single, that's one line. Okay? You're gonna go and we're gonna head over to the training center, and then we're gonna do a muster over the training center. Starting from the front line. Go and pick up your bag.
Hold on. First things first, where you going? Where you going? Both your hands. Looking like this? Yeah. Fix that. How would you fix that? How? You're not a civilian anymore. Put that in one. Get yourself together.
From there, that line means full control by the trainers at the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. Instead of walking with our bags, we're now forced to double to the pit where even more trainers were waiting to get acquainted with us. Once at the pit, it's a barrage of instructions for each of the new recruits. In this instance, my media colleagues and I find ourselves probably wishing we had opted out of this assignment. The trainers are in your face and relentless. They question dress, demeanor, and presentation, all in an effort to attack the mindset of the new recruits, in addition to stimulating physical capabilities. This is just a small taste of what actual recruits who want to enlist experience. From the pit, everything stands still for the morning colors parade. Officers align for various drills and other salutes before senior officers. It signifies the hoisting of the RBDF Jack and the Bahamian flag that calls upon officers to salute. The program is not that long, but it occurs every morning and afternoon at the Coral Harbor base. Morning colors done, new recruits now make their way to the dorm area where trainers continue their inspection. Their attention now is ensuring that no contraband is packed away in the belongings of males or females. Now that's behind us. Uniforms are issued to each recruit. In this instance, we're issued a PE kit in addition to fatigues. But after that warm introduction to marine life on base, trainer Petty Officer Shamika Duncombe explains why recruits are pushed to the breaking point.
Once they hit the main gate, they go through a process of identifying who they are and if it's the right person's here, who's supposed to be here. And so we go through identifying them by looking at their passports and ensuring that we have the right persons joining the new entry at that time. Once that process is completed, then they move into something that we call sign and attestation forms. And it's more of a contract where they will sign a contract to serve the Royal Bahamas Defense Force and the country at large for at least 3 to 5 years.
Recruits have to look forward to 16 weeks of intense basic training before they pass out. That training is intensified if they are selected to join the Commando Squadron. The squadron is the amphibious unit of the RBDF, which should be able to function for up to 2 months unassisted by any other department. Lieutenant Commander Derek Ferguson explains the functions of the Commando Squadron unit.
Well, the Commando Squadron is the infantry amphibious unit of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, which pretty much entails us being responsible for land operations, as well as operations in the maritime domain, as well as those spaces that is closely associated with land and sea, and those littorals where boats can't go, but we could go. Sometimes where land forces cannot go, but we can go. We try to get those persons who have the zeal for a rough life, persons who are physically competent, whereby they have the mindset, the physical ability, and the character that enables them to engage in a rough experience, a rough way of life, whereby it's an easy day for them. Whatever they would experience as recruit inside that training environment, what they now need to think about, they could think of that and add that tenfold, the experience that they'll be engaged in. Because once they come to us, they now have to go through another 8 to sometimes 16 weeks of training, to whereby they're now cycled through what we call a basic infantry course that is physically engaging, that is labor intensive, and requires a lot of long hours, no sleep, and so forth. The whole idea is to put the body through that stress experience, whereby to see that they're able to still, after a stressful environment, a stressful ordeal, that they can still function as normal complement Marines to execute missions. For example, one of the taskings that we could be expect from this unit to carry out during the aftermath of a hurricane is anything that deals with swiftwater rescue. Most of our persons are combat swimmers, combat divers. So if there's any type of swiftwater rescue that we need to conduct, these will be the persons who will be engaged for that. Many be the times after the passage of hurricane, you will have seaports maybe blocked by debris. Our swimmers, our combat swimmers and divers are capable of doing swimming, doing diving, to conduct minor and minimum type of salvage work, whereby we may be required to ensure that the ports are clear for boats to come in and make hurricane relief efforts possible.
Leading Seaman Omar Albury is a member of the Commando Squadron unit. He walks us through some of those warm-up exercises to get us primed for the obstacle course, which stresses the body in ways instructors desire.
The obstacle course is just like a microcosm of what will happen in the daily routine. Each obstacle is actually a task to be done. You can do it properly, where it'll be easier to do. You will say in your head, let's just say, for instance, as simple as the leopard crawl. It might sound simple to crawl under an obstacle, but if you are not fully there, you'll be dragging, the technique will be off, and it'll take you longer, you'll do it harder, you might give up halfway. But if you were to be trained to be in a stressful environment and keep the technique in mind, the obstacles become easier. So we use the obstacle course as a way to see how the training is affecting you. For instance, as a simple obstacle, it should be done simply. If we see you having trouble with it, we already know you're already shut down mentally. You know, your leg hurting, so you start guarding, stuff like that. So that's one of the reasons why we use an obstacle course.
In a naval environment where survival is an instinct that will be keenly relied on, Leading Seaman Albury explains what Marines consume on missions.
Very simple stuff. Each column MREs, he is ready to eat. They usually last on average about 5 years, some as far as 8. But if you store them properly, they're almost indefinite, okay? The food stuff within it is designed for you to eat, to get enough calories for you to perform. One of these should be enough for you, one a day, all right? Unfortunately, because the eating habits, especially in this part of the world, we tend not to eat the whole thing or not everything in it. So we try to issue at least 2 per person per day on any operation.
Marines are often in combat mode and do their part to stay ready by running through drills with weapons or physical drills to remain in optimum shape. What the Sandy Bottom Project's $232 million injection did was expand on the offerings at HMBS Coral Harbor in a number of ways. For starters, there were a number of physical changes that took place. The base's harbor was stretched to accommodate larger vessels docking, and in keeping with its decentralization plans, there are port facilities in the northern, central, and southern Bahamas. Commando Defense Force Captain Tellis Bethel.
We're required to patrol our borders 24/7. And what we do, for example, is we divide the Bahamas up into quadrants or patrol sectors, and we ensure that those vessels that are assigned to those areas are actually doing that job. Additionally, we're in the process of structuring the Defense Force such that we have bases in northern, central, and southern areas of the Bahamas for the purpose of assigning our patrol craft in those areas on permanent basis. That's part of our decentralization plan. And as a result of that, we're able to maintain a presence in areas where we know illicit activities occur. Also requires a lot of communication between my command team and myself. And with that, if there are any concerns, then we're able to address it accordingly. The concept is with the process of decentralizing our operations. Right now, we are currently Nassau-centric with regards to operations. The additional patrol craft assist us in assigning vessels to the various regions in the Bahamas, northern, central, and southern Bahamas. Before, we were unable to do that because we had limited numbers of patrol craft. Now, we found that we've been very effective with respect to maintaining presence in those areas that we know that were known to be problematic. Right now, you're in the middle of transition. As you can see, a lot of development is taking place. A major improvement that's taken place is the actual dredging of Coral Harbor. Before time, our larger vessels were unable to be accommodated in this harbor. Now, all of our vessels can be accommodated, and it certainly helps with the ease of operations and loading the vessels and preparing them to go on patrol assignments. And so that is an excellent progress being made.
HMBS Arthur Hanna was one of those vessels commissioned through the Sandy Bottom Project that bolsters the law enforcement capabilities of the RBDF. Its commanding officer, Acting Lieutenant Commander Byrne Wright. The crew of HMBS Arthur Hanna are charged with patrol duties on the high seas that often calls for its crew to board vessels or conduct a search of an uninhabited key. Prior to boarding HMBS Arthur Hanna, we were prepped on what goes into a key search, as it's called, how the unit finds out, and what elements they pay close attention to. Leading Seaman Omar Albury heads the search of Golden Key. Now that we're prepped, we board the dory and are released from HMBS Arthur Hanna to make our way to conduct the search. This key is a remote one sitting about 7 miles off the shore from the southwestern New Providence, so the team makes a timed approach to disembark the dory. One member of the media's embed team misses his footing, falling overboard. With everyone now on land, we get into formation and fan out in 2 teams and begin our search looking for anything out of the expected ordinary. Leading Seaman Albury explains why key searches are conducted.
We mark out or we choose a key. We want to check and see if there's any kind of contraband, any personnel, anything like that illegal going on, or any illegal contraband on the key. So once we do it from a vessel, we'll point out which key we want to go to. Jump onto the seaboat, that'll be the smaller boat on our craft. We carry on a team, usually about 4 to 6 persons. Everybody will be armed, properly briefed. Once we get onto the key, we'll do different search patterns depending on the foliage on the key, depending on the size of the key, and also depending on the time frame or if the information received. The biggest indication when it comes to people, you will see them on the beach more than likely. You will see them on the beach or close to the waterside area. They usually wouldn't stay hidden, or if they would be there illegally and would be hiding, they wouldn't. Most people wouldn't be able to determine that our boat is a military boat, especially smaller boats. They still come to the craft and they see it coming to the key. When it comes to contraband, when it comes to drugs or money or any illegal things, you really don't get an indication until you get onto the ground itself. You'll notice things like broken branches. You'll notice things like marks in the sand, like footprints, and sometimes, or even if they try to sweep the footprints, you'll also be able to notice it'll be something out of the ordinary. You'll notice, like, if it be any bushes that they walk through, a lot of branches be bent but not broken. Usually, if you were to find personnel, you were to find people. Of course, you'll get to try to determine how many of them are on the key, how long they would have been on the key at this point in time. You'd be already communicated with the ship or with headquarters, with operations. And then they will be alerting the other authorities, immigration, customs, and so forth and so on. Once you determine how many people are on the key, the medical condition of them, then we transport them back to the vessel and then back to base.
Our search turned up empty-handed, so it's now back to the dory. Everyone made it safely on. Captain Bathel explains that Marines make countless sacrifices to protect the borders of the Bahamas and its fisheries resources, which have had positive results.
Their presence has been a significant deterrent to a number of poachers that would have been in our areas. Before time, foreign poachers, namely Dominicans, would fish at will in Bahamian waters alongside Bahamian fishermen. Now, with the acquisition of patrol craft and the presence of Defense Force personnel, those Dominicans no longer come and fish at will. And we have apprehended quite a number of them over the last 2 years.
Marines on board these crafts find themselves out to sea for as much as 2 weeks at a time, if not longer. Executive Officer or Second in Command, Acting Senior Lieutenant Tamiko Johnson, stresses to crew the importance of safety and how routine exercises can easily change on the high seas, especially if a member of the crew goes overboard.
In regards to the man overboard, the way that it happened, it can simulate exactly how it does happen in real life. There were incidences in recent history where we have had a man overboard situation, and we've had to go over our procedures and how we muster our crew, how we account for our personnel, and how we recover a man overboard in the event that it does happen. All this is something that you do time and time and time again, because we need the responses of our Marines to be instinctual. There's no time to take for granted or no time to waste when you have a person in the water. And in conditions like this, even though the Bahamas is in a tropical climate and it's warm weather, etc., you stay in the water long enough, you will get hypothermia. And based on the condition that you enter the water, you're not going to fall in the water ready to swim all the time. You might have been feeling ill. You might be unconscious. You might be injured. All of these things can be a factor into what happens when a man goes overboard.
Crew members demonstrate what happens during a drill if a call alerts those on board that a man goes overboard. Participate in the fire drill. New to the process of donning a fire suit, I struggle to get dressed, even with assistance. Once suited up, I make my way below deck for a fire simulation in the gear, which feels like the weight of 10 men, along with another officer. On the high seas, emergencies can arise at a moment's notice. Therefore, drills are repeated, aimed to improve response time, as it could mean the difference between life and death.
the same amount of persons that I carry out in the same condition that they went out, I want to do my best to bring back home. And that is what we try to endeavor and instill in our personnel by going over these drills over and over. And these drills, like I always say to Michael, they're not to point fingers and they're not to show up somebody, or they're not to cast blame. That's not the point of these drills. The point of these drills is to get better in the way that we respond to various emergency situations, iron out the kinks, and so that in the event that it does happen, we don't make the same mistakes that we make in the drills. Because then at that point, somebody's life is at stake, and it's a real life event.
Crew members fill a number of roles to ensure the overall workings of the HMBS Arthur Hanna. Coxswain Petty Officer Pedro Roll not only steers the vessel but also acts as disciplinarian and medic on board. Roll says he knows his crew well, which helps to address challenges when they arise.
I have a crew of, say, 20 junior Marines. Each person comes with their own challenges, and because I embrace my job, so I have to now deal with each person individually and collectively. Some people embrace work, some people slouchful, you have some people who would be negative, and then you have some people who are just positive and high-spirited. So you have to do your best to get everybody to one common level, to achieve one common goal.
The ship's crew is not all male. Woman Marine Patricia Davis joined the Royal Bahamas Defense Force in January 2016. She acts as the ship's official recorder.
Basically, anything dealing with logging, taking notes of everything as they happen in a timely manner. For example, if we were to run a fire drill, I would come upstairs, log when the drill started, report basically everything, that all information was sent to us, just report it down, state timing.
Crew members have cross-trained in a number of other departments. Chief Engineer Petty Officer David Fernando has worked special ops within the Commando Squadron. He's a military diver, and he ensures the HMBS Arthur Hanna runs as it should. He says training allows him to perform at the highest levels.
If the command sees necessary that we have a high-level threat, or suggested that we have a high-level threat, or we have information that there might be illegal immigrants or drugs or whatever on board on a key, I would be one of those persons, or probably be the person that leads the boarding team at that point. The chief engineer is that person who's responsible for the upkeeping, the maintenance of all the equipment. We have 5 major areas. We have the engineer, the mechanical part, air condition, electrical, the hull, the sewer system and all that, and then we have the seagoing, the small craft.
Working on the bridge is a particular task that everybody is called upon to play their part, keeping their eyes out for threats on the radar and logging it. Life out to sea has its hectic but light moments, and the crew of the HMBS Arthur Hanna are keen on fulfilling its mandate to protect our borders at all costs. While the Defense Force has purchased new vessels to add to its fleet, it has also modernized existing ones to meet its ever-changing demands. In April, the 19-year-old HMBS Nassau was completely overhauled, and for the first time in history, it docked at HMBS Coral Harbor. Much fanfare was made about it, as well as the crew receiving a warm welcome back home. The commander of the Defense Force also boarded the ship before it entered its newly dredged harbor to observe the maneuverability of the crew in process. Captain Bethel formerly captained this very vessel in his career. He was happy to welcome the crew home, returning after traveling more than 4,000 nautical miles across the Atlantic for 17 days on the 200-foot craft.
This vessel has just undergone a major refit that has taken some 9 months to accomplish. HMBS Nassau is the name of the vessel, and certainly this will work towards enhancing the overall operations of the Defense Force. We are happy that this extensive work was accomplished in the Netherlands by the Dutch shipbuilding company Damen, and as a result, this vessel and its crew will go through several weeks of workup and training, and then it will be deployed on long-term deployment basis.
Commander Bethel said Nassau will play a vital role in combating against the threats on the high seas, inclusive of smugglers, poachers, and drug traffickers. In addition, the vessel and its crew will also lend assistance in disaster relief operations. 27 crew members made the voyage. Its commanding officer is Gregory Brown. Commander Brown was happy to be back home.
Well, the vessel was able to comfortably cover over 4,000 nautical miles, which means she can be deployed for an extended period of time. She's equipped with the latest lab equipment, stabilizers on board, we have autopilot on board, so we are well equipped for the job we are required to do. As the commanding officer of this craft, it was a pleasure to sail from Europe to the Bahamas. In my command, I had competent officers, senior rates, and junior rates, along with a team from Ghana. So we were well equipped across the Atlantic.
The voyage did not require the crew to stop to refuel. The man behind the steering was Coxswain Petty Officer Randy McFall. He welcomed the upgrades at HMBS Coral Harbor that now allows the vessel to dock at base. He is also very pleased with the vessel's modern upgrades, especially its steering.
This one is outfitted with the new joystick, and it's a small, like a video game. It's really sensitive, and you have to know what you're doing, and it takes a lot of practice and skill to maneuver a ship like this. It's much easier because when the commanding officer or the officer watch give command and steering on this, it's more easier to just touch the joystick and almost command it where you want it to go. We have several exercises that we practice in case we encounter any of those activities on the high seas, like man overboard, when the special sea division close up for action station, and we see a vessel or illegal migrants or any illegal activities happening, we could just touch the joystick or the steering apparatus, and it makes a quick turn, and we start our pursuit right away.
Captain Carlos Costas was the man hired by Damen, that's the Dutch ship builders, to return the vessel to the Bahamas with the crew. It's not his first journey of this kind to the Bahamas.
We first brought the Rolly Gray here, and then the Durwood Knolls, or the other way around, I forgot. But those are the 42 meters. They are different equipped, and again, this is Nassau. I mean, she's quite old, 19 years now. But the way she refitted now, she's able to work the next 19 years at least for the Bahamas Defense Force.
The Sandy Bottom project now allows all of the Royal Bahamas Defense Forces vessels to dock here at HMBS Coral Harbor, but there are other successes as well. On the eve of the force's 37th anniversary, National Security Minister, the Honorable Dr. Bernard Nottage, in his address, said that in the last 5 years, RBDF operations have netted a total of 13 poaching vessels from the Dominican Republic, with approximately 189,000 pounds of fisheries product seized and over 200 Dominicans arrested. The court also confiscated all fishing vessels and fisheries products, and poachers were either fined or imprisoned. Additionally, almost 6,000 migrants, predominantly Haitian nationals, were apprehended by RBDF crew or through joint operations with immigration officials. 2 years ago, the RBDF assisted the Bahamas Customs and Excise Department in the formation of its Marine Unit, which, through the assistance of the RBDF, has seen the confiscation of 17 arms and 1,000 rounds of ammunition from visiting boaters. The RBDF also successfully discovered or seized some 2,000 pounds of marijuana on board vessels or on quays during patrols or key searches. Marines in the 5 years have also assisted more than 620 persons being rescued or assisted at sea. The military organization has also established a canine unit for its military police to enhance its drug, bomb, and firearms detection capabilities. Illegal migrants entering our borders as well as poachers are a major challenge. The airwing crew often conducts routine patrols of quadrants of the Bahamas to intercept these illegal operations. Commander Captain Tellis Bethel is accompanying us on this mission. Pilot Lieutenant Marcelinius Roll explains the route.
We're going to take off from New Providence. We're going to head to the east, more like to the east, and we're going to go towards the northern tip of North Eleuthera. We're going to come down approximately between 5 and 7 miles on the eastern side of the eastern side of Eleuthera, continue on down to Half Moon Key. Now from Half Moon Key, we're going to head west towards the Exuma Keys, clear the Exuma Keys, clear the eastern shoreline, landing back in New Providence.
Now that we've been briefed, it's time to take to the air. Commander Bethel says aerial sweeps are critical to protecting the borders of the country.
This is very important for the Defense Force to conduct this kind of patrol. What has happened in recent times is the pressure that we've been applying to the southern Bahamas has caused a shift in the trends and patterns of illegal migration. And we've been experiencing now migrant vessels seeking the more remote routes along the eastern seaboard of the country. And the area patrolling right now is on the ocean side of Eleuthera. And we've had lots of reports of vessels being sighted in these areas, and we ourselves have made sightings in the past. So it shows the extent of desperation that people are taking to try and make a landfall in the Bahamas. Before time, you heard a lot about the migrants landing all the way north as far as the southern coast of New Providence. You don't hear much of that anymore. And so there's been a shift that's taken place as a result of us changing our tactics and strategies. And so what we're experiencing now is this remote route that's being used. And so we have now forced to change our patrol routes and to really intercept these vessels. And we've had some success in doing so.
The surveillance flight takes us over various family islands, including Eleuthera and the Exuma Keys, where the flight crew keeps their eyes trained to the high seas for anything that looks amiss. Lieutenant Roll on what exactly they're looking for.
During those patrols, we look for poachers, we look for migrants, we look for anything that is suspicious. In some cases, we also are calling on for SAR, which is search and rescue cases, but we particularly now, because of the Dominican incident recently, we have been strategically planned and patrolling in areas of the Great Bahama Banks, and we now are strategically, from our intelligence department, which works along with our operations department, we are now targeting areas in the central Bahamas, the southern Bahamas, and we patrol as much as we can looking for illegal migrants, poachers, or anything that is suspicious that is illegal at the time that we are flying.
Last November, a Defense Force vessel was extensively damaged after a confrontation with Marines and Dominican poachers in the Cay Lobos areas off Ragged Island. 2 vessels were apprehended by the Marines. They remain now docked at HMBS Coral Harbor. During the encounter, one of 2 fishing vessels being pursued rammed the crew of the HMBS Madeira in its attempt to make an arrest. The arrest was eventually made, with Marines taking into custody 50 poachers. This is just one of many examples of the dangers that Marines face on the high seas.
I must applaud the members of the Defense Force Squadron, all those who crew our ships, as well as those who engage in other operational capacities, for the tremendous sacrifice that they have made in maintaining a presence in remote areas of the Bahamas, and to offering such great sacrifices in that they're not able to come and enjoy the things that we normally would enjoy by spending their time out there. As a result, their presence has been a significant deterrent to a number of poachers that would have been in our areas. Before time, foreign poachers, namely Dominicans, would fish at will in Bahamian waters alongside Bahamian fishermen. Now, with the acquisition of patrol craft and the presence of Defense Force personnel, those Dominicans no longer come and fish at will.
and we have apprehended quite a number of them over the last 2 years, and there's 2 just in the harbor just behind us that were brought in. And of course, when people get used to violating the territories of others, then it becomes a desperate situation when that country puts its foot down and say no more. And so we make it a strong point to say that illegal fishing is no longer welcomed here. And I applaud once again the men and women who serve in the Defense Force for their bold efforts to make that kind of sacrifice and do what it takes to apprehend the fishermen, even when they offer some degree of violence. But our persons have been able to counter that and to effectively apprehend and bring to justice those poachers. And we have had tremendous support by our local fishing community.
Lieutenant Rose says the areas patrolled by the Air Wing are vast.
Because, you know, we have to cover over 245,000 square miles of water, from ocean to river banks to keys, and it's very vast. And although we're in the air, we're still limited in our visual capabilities because of haze, because of glare, and sometimes it's because of bad weather.
But there are other challenges the air crew encounters.
Because the Exuma Keys, as I was saying, is very much attractive to the tourists. And right now, a lot of the migrants use sailboats, and they are using a lot of different American-style sailboats versus the old wooden-style sailboats. So right now, they would come in, and during the day, they would drop their sails to hide themselves among the tourists or the persons that are on the sailboats. And then it's difficult for us, it's a challenge for us on the aerial side to totally look down and see to say whether it is an illegal boat or it is an American tourist. Well, one of the most things is that the American sailboats is going to be much more cleaner. It's going to be more on a hygienic site. And over the years, we have been training our air crew and others that go out on the patrols with us to definitely look for certain things. Dirty sails, the mast being dirty, and a lot of the illegal boats do not have small sailboats that the American sailboats would normally have trailing along as they are going up the waters of the Bahamas.
And what happens once a suspicious vessel is sighted?
Once we find a suspected boat, we get the position, we give them a description, and we radio it into our operations. Our operations then get it to our squadron, and they would send a boat out as soon as possible and investigate it as best we can. Or if we can get local help, the local police or local government, or sometimes we'll be in Exuma Park. The park warden goes over to get some assistance once we get the information.
Right now we are Nassau-centric, so as we're decentralizing our operations, a part of that is not only deploying our men and our ships to the various bases in the Family Islands, but we're also going to have permanently deployed aircraft as well, so we'll have quick access to the areas that are threatened most.
Adequate manpower will be the determining factor that contributes to the success of the RBDF in its interdiction efforts, but more inroads are being made by women who join the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. On this patrol, woman Marine Canellis Gibson is a part of the aircrew. She's been a serving Marine for the last 7 years.
High school, I wanted to be a pilot, and I saw my opportunity here in the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, so I took it, grasped the opportunity.
Her colleague, Lieutenant Rowe, views more women joining the unit as a step in the right direction.
This is bringing a great diversity to the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, that way we can have males and females trained, and we are now inviting more females that are interested in becoming pilots to start the aircrew part of it and then transitioning to becoming pilots. And it'll just strengthen the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, it'll strengthen the Air Wing Department, and it'll just strengthen the tasks at hand that we have to complete.
While the maritime borders of the Bahamas are vast, Marines are prepared to do what it takes, as has been demonstrated, to protect its fisheries stock from the threat of poachers and/or any threats that may arise. Discipline, dedication, and determination are the trademarks of Marines, and by extension, the focus of its Rangers program that's all about youth empowerment. However, Rangers Director Lieutenant Devon Duncombe says the launch of the program more than 20 years ago served a different purpose.
Donald Davis Junior High School. Basically, we dealt with at-risk young men. Since then, we basically would have mushroomed into a youth development program. We're in 22 schools in New Providence, 7 schools in Grand Bahama, 4 in Abaco, 1 in the Berry Islands, and 1 in Abaco. The requirements are simple. You have to be a student, grades 7 through 12. And we actually also keep you on for an additional year or 2 based on if you have interest in the Defense Force. So some of them may graduate at 16 and so they want to become officers, and so we hold them around the program to keep them sharp until they reach 18, meet the requirements for the organization, and try to filter them in.
Lieutenant Duncombe says the program provides similar training for the youth, so they are quite familiar with what's expected if they decide to enlist when they're old enough to do so.
The Ranger program basically mirrors that of the Defense Force in that a lot of the training that you would have done here, they would have seen and done already, inclusive of its subject matter, navigation, ceremonial, seamanship, campcraft, those types of maritime-based training. We also have fitness incorporated and drill incorporated in our training as well.
Currently, there are more than 1,100 Rangers in the program.
We're about building young leaders. We have something now in the organization, part of the vision now is something called Operation Regeneration. And that is, we now are gearing our Rangers up to take on the challenges of their that they face in communities and schools and society. And so the Defense Force is actively moving towards just youth development.
While others may contemplate joining the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, those enlisted reflect on what it takes to join and some of the greatest successes they've experienced.
Well, I would say if you come to join the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, come with a mind frame that it's going to be a lot of hard work, and it also brings out the best inside of you.
We have a variety of career paths, and so definitely I would say for any individual, especially when it comes down to the discipline, okay, we can transform that civilian young person into being a Marine.
When you look at a recruit when they first come in, feeble, can't do much, and as you watch them progress and finally reach a standard, most rewarding.
I would say joining the Airwing Department, flying for the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, and enjoying the challenges just as much as the excitement of flying each day, seeing different things, and being able to be a part of giving strategic or important information to help combat what we are out there fighting each day.
Recently, as in 2008, I was appointed the Comptroller at Government House, being the first Defense Force officer to hold that post, and it was a rewarding experience.
One of the experiences that stands out for me is when I was on one of my initial ships, the HMBS Yellow Welder, and I had the awesome task of navigating to the Turks and Caicos Islands for the first time in my career.
The Defense Force is a world where ordinary people do extraordinary things as an ordinary way of life. So by all means, I would welcome those who want to do extraordinary things to join the Royal Bahamas Defense Force.
With everything there risk, you join the Defense Force knowing that there is a possibility that you may never come back. And that is your destiny, so may it be. But in every job, there are risks. This is a high-risk job, and you join knowing full well that that can happen.
Just 6 weeks into its official establishment, Marines and the country would have its first line of defense attacked by a neighboring threat. The end result would be the loss of the HMBS Flamingo vessel and 4 men.
Who lost their lives were the very first in the history of the Bahamas, of a newly independent country, to suffer, the ultimate demise on behalf of a very, very young nation. And so we should not take that for granted and always be mindful that somewhere along the line, someone is going to have to be responsible for putting themselves in harm's way on behalf of others. And the Defense Force happens to be that entity that's been called upon to do so.
37 years later, Marines will remember their fallen during a ceremony on May 10th, while the country will also be holding its general election. Commander of the Defense Force, Tellis Bethel, said this year will be no different, and the Defense Force will remember and honor its own. It was described as a calm day on May 10th, 1980. The HMBS Flamingo was on patrol near the Ragged Island chain when it encountered Cuban fishing vessels poaching in Bahamian waters. The HMBS Flamingo would give chase, and the poachers radioed Cuban authorities, who in turn responded by sending MiG fighters who fired upon the Flamingo. The crew was forced to abandon ship during the confrontation.
During that time in 1980, down in the southern Bahamas, the Cubans fished our waters without permission, and they just did it because there was really not much policing to keep them at bay during the time. A few minutes after arresting them, one of the MiG jets flew across the bow of Flamingo and discharged their machine guns. I was what they call the sea boat driver, the small boat that we use to travel from our ship to other ships that when we need to do investigations. So I was sitting on the deck of the first Cuban boat because I had my sea boat tied behind that boat. And though persons were running on the deck of the Flamingo, fires were starting to catch. And then there was a lot of gunpowder smoke in the air because of the explosions of the incoming missiles that had hit Flamingo. During all of that, I jumped in the sea boat, started the engine, and started to proceed towards Flamingo to pick up persons out of the water, which I did. Right? But even during all of this, the plane was still attacking, shooting at the ship, coming and going and shooting at the ship. And eventually, the last person I saw on the vessel was the captain of the vessel. He was on the bridge of the ship, which was also leaning, and he was there with a fire extinguisher trying to put out a fire. And so I ran over to him and I said, "Sir, you have to get off of this vessel. You can't save it, it's sinking." Mind you, during that time, I didn't count. I didn't know that, I didn't have every run. So we did what we call in the military, we did a muster of the crew. And then we realized that there were 4 persons not present. And we viewed the Flamingo, and by then the sun was going down also. Really beautiful evening. Well, in comparison to what was going on, that kind of marked the evening forever for me. And he insisted and he instructed us that we all salute Flamingo because by then she was just about submerged. Our community takes it for granted that we work here and we are just disposable. I sometimes feel that way.
The men who perished were 21-year-old able seaman Fenric Stirrup, 21-year-old Marine seaman Austin Rudolph Smith, 21-year-old Marine seaman David Allison Tucker, and 23-year-old Marine seaman Edward Arnold Williams. The Flamingo incident occurred more than 3 decades ago, but Lieutenant Commander Neely admits the recent debate of the issue of the observance falling on the same day as the general elections was a tough pill to swallow.
I listened, and it was painstaking for me because I could hear from the voices of some of the persons that this incident happened long before they were born, so they didn't really have a good feeling about what we were talking about. So they were really harsh with their criticism. I just wish that people would be more sensitive to what transpired that day. back then we all had this feeling about being patriotic. And the average young Bahamian back then didn't come here for a job. They came here because they were patriotic and they wanted to serve their country.
He called for us as a people to continue to rebuild our patriotism, looking at ways to honor all persons in uniform that lose their lives in the line of duty, not just his comrades from the Flamingo incident.
We're in the position where we have police fall in the line of duty. We had those Defense Force officers, and more than those 4 fell in the line of duty, not just those 4 on the Flamingo. I think it's now that the nation should now start having a better appreciation for the men and women that are in uniform, and not take it for granted that, you know, these are just tools we have and we'll use them, and when they fall we'll just pull in another one, because these individuals all have families. I think now we need to pay more respect to the persons in uniform, and government, quote unquote, whoever it is, needs to identify them as heroes and send out actions to portray how they feel about them. Like, take for instance, we could start with getting a cemetery for our fallen heroes.
Marines say May 10th, 1980 is a day they will never forget, and they encourage all Bahamians to remember those that make the ultimate sacrifice. But what is now in store for the future of the guardians of our heritage? Commander Bethel said over the next 5 years, 3 goals will be realized, the first of which in focus now is Operation Decentralization. The second is Operation Transformation.
So to assist us in that, we are looking at developing our own Maritime Defense Training Institute, where we'll be training our officers and our senior enlisted to better prepare them for the role their role in the Defense Force and beyond. And so we're looking to establish accredited programs as well. In addition to the professional military education, we're also looking at another area of development, what we call naval infantry training. And we feel as though that is an area we want to become specialists in, or known as setting the standard of excellence in that area as well. It's more looking at amphibious commando type training here in the Bahamas, focusing on the maritime aspects.
Commander Bethel said with bases now in the North, Central, and Southern Bahamas, the organization wants the full support of the Air Wing unit to be updated as well.
We want to be in a position where we're able to deploy aircraft to each region for long-term deployment programs. In addition to that, we want to be able to operate drones within those regions as well as onboard aircraft. And so what we're doing right now, we've established a pilot program for drone implementation of the force, where we're operating smaller models to begin the initial training and development phase of it. We want to bring on the pilot training aspect of it, where we're a flight training center within the Air Wing, so that we can begin training our own pilots. So these are the areas that we're working towards with the overall development of our human capital.
Commander Bethel said currently there are approximately 1,500 members, but the plan is to increase the ranks.
We want to grow to a total over the next 3-4 years of 2,000 members. And as a part of our plan for doing so, we are now doubling the amount of intake for each entry. On average, it would be 60 persons per entry. We have now sought approval to take on 120 persons to train, and we hope to bring them on in May. By May of this year as the first group, and we want to take on another 120 during the last quarter of this year.
Commander Bethel has been a serving member of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force for the last 31 years. He has previously served as Deputy Commander between 2010 and 2015 and assumed the acting command since March 2nd. He has previously served as Deputy Commander of the Defense Force between 2010 to 2015 and assumed the acting command since March 2nd, 2015. He was confirmed as Commodore this April.
I've been most pleased about is the kind of response I'm getting from so many in the force, in that they're committed to service, they're committed to working hard, they're committed to accomplishing the task. And I think that's how you measure the quality of a true leader. It's not when things are going good and everybody's happy and, you know, we're having a great time. The real test comes when there is opposition, where the circumstances are such that you're not used to, you're not comfortable with, but you're able to navigate your way through the process and still accomplish your mission and set a standard as an outcome.
Commander Bethel and the Marines he lead will continue to be the guardians of this rich heritage, protecting against the threat of smugglers, narcotics traffickers, and even those who pose terror threats. That dedication will lead even if to the ultimate sacrifice.